مستجيب للداعي، جب دعوتي بإسراعي، واشفي جميع وجاعي، يا مرتجى يا رحمن.
يا مستجيب للداعي، جب دعوتي بإسراعي، واشفي جميع وجاعي، يا مرتجى يا رحمن.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. This is my project and my name is Hamza Muhammad Abdul Wahab, and today we're going to interview the Imam of this masjid, Sheikh Nashwan from Yemen. Rahman ar-Rahim. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Today we have an interview with the Imam of the Surah, Ustaz Nashwan. Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullah.
Can you tell us more details about the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam?
Our Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam is a messenger of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala chose him as the best person on this earth, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala chose him to be a mercy for whole ummah, for all Muslims, for all the world. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَمَا أَرْسَلْنَاكَ إِلَّا رَحْمَةً لِلْعَالَمِينَ. زكى الله سبحانه وتعالى نبينا محمد صلى الله عليه وسلم في لسانه فقال وما ينطق عن الهوى، وزكاه في عقله فقال ما ضل صاحبكم وما غوى، وزكاه في صدره فقال ألم نشرح لك صدرك، وزكاه الله سبحانه وتعالى في خلقه فقال وإنك لعلى خلق عظيم، وزكاه الله سبحانه وتعالى جملة وتفصيلا فقال وما أرسلناك إلا رحمة للعالمين. النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم اختاره الله سبحانه وتعالى ليكون للأمة هاديا ودليلا.
As for the second question, why do you think anyone will insult the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam?
Sorry, can you repeat?
Why would anyone will insult the Prophet?
Allah musta'an. I think this person, he doesn't know about our Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. He doesn't know more details about the way of our Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, about his morals, about his akhlaq, about his message to this ummah, to the whole world. I think this person who talk something bad about our Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, just he wants to make a story, or he wants to get something like money or something in politics side, or he wants to make himself famous. So he talks something contrary the fact.
Attract the people.
Yeah. So he wants to touch the heart for all Muslims. الذي يتحدث بسوء عن النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم وفي الحقيقة لا يعرف سيرته، لا يعرف منهجه، لا يعرف سنته، لا يعرف كيف كان يتعامل النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم مع الناس. كان رحيما رؤوفا ودودا يحسن للقريب وللبعيد، كان صابرا محتسبا لا يرجو من وراء دعوته لا جزاء ولا شكورا، إنما كان يبتغي بذلك رضا الله سبحانه وتعالى والائتمار بما جاء من عند الله سبحانه وتعالى وتطبيق القرآن الذي أنزل عليه صلى الله عليه وسلم.
Thank you for the good. Inshallah, many people will get benefit from it. Inshallah. Least but not last, we have our two main lecturers, Sheikh from Kenya and another Sheikh from Egypt, who are gonna tell us about defending the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam.
ننزل ونتظاهر من أجل أمور سياسية، وهذا أفهم. تمام،
وننزل
ولكن
ونتظاهر.
لا ننزل ونتظاهر في الإساءة للرسول صلى الله عليه وسلم.
طب
يعني خليني افهم، انا
من
عايز
وجهة
افهم برضه،
نظرك.
عايز اعرف الموقف ده، موقف يعني مثلا حزب الحريه والعداله. انا اريد بما انك من الاحزاب الاسلاميه حزب النور، حزب الحريه والعداله الان قال هننزل يوم الجمعه،
نعم.
وبعد كده تراجع عن هذه الدعوه وقال الدعوه تبقى رمزيه قدام المساجد. ماشي، التبرير ايه هو؟ التبرير عشان ما يقعش مزيد من القتلى والضحايا. في كل الجمعه التي خرج فيها التيار الاسلامي وشهدت حشدا كبيرا داخل ميدان التحرير، تمام، لم يكن بها ضحايا. أريد تفسير لهذا الأمر والتراجع الآن عن التظاهرة في ميدان التحرير من حزب الحرية والعدالة. أي أنتم أيضا كحزب نور لم يكن التمثيل بالشكل الأمثل داخل ميدان التحرير. دعني أقول هذا الأمر، أنتم لو تقدرون على الحشد تقدرون على الحشد،
بس
فسر لي والله فسروا لي.
اصل انا لا
يعني انا لما
أفصل في
اسال الناس
حزب
من احزاب الحريه والعداله،
لا
طب ما انا اسال الناس من حزب النور،
طب ما أنا
طب ادوني تفسير اكبر من كده. في اكبر من الاساءه للرسول؟
لا طبعا.
قبل ما يكونش
لا طبعا. صح ولا لا؟ ولا انا غلطان؟
لا طبعا.
طيب
طبعا.
الان لماذا نتظاهر على امور سياسيه ونزايد على امور سياسيه ولا نتظاهر حشدا لرسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم؟ في اكبر من رسول الله؟
لا طبعا.
طيب انا راجل مسلم غاضب على رسولي صلى الله عليه وسلم، اغضب عليه، يجب علي ان اسال اسئله مشروعه اجيبوا علي. انا عايز اسال سؤال واوجهه ايضا لكل اعضاء حزب الحريه والعداله، تمام؟ اسمحوا لي ان اوجه هذا السؤال، انا هنا لكي اوجه الاسئله، تمام؟ لو كان هناك فيلم مثير للرئيس محمد مرسي، ايه اللي هيحصل؟ انا عايز افهم.
So we're here in London with Judge Marilyn Mornington. You've had a very active career. In fact, you're actually a district judge in the United Kingdom, and which is quite a significant position, legal position, because you have a lot of judges under you. But before we just get into a conversation, I'd appreciate it. One, you've only recently converted to Islam, so maybe you could just tell us a little bit about that.
I've been specialising in crime against women, violence against women and child abuse now for some 10 to 12 years on a policy level for the United Kingdom. And I became, by no choice of my own, because of the work I was doing, closely involved with violence against women in the Muslim communities in this country. And in order to understand better where they were coming from, began to read about Islam, began to read the Quran, and to mix with Muslims. I would have to say I don't think I really ever had any choice in the matter, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had his eyes on me, and that was it. From that moment on, without any choice of mine, I kept on meeting one person after the other who led me down a path where there really was no turning back from, because the more I got to know about Islam, about the Prophet, peace be upon him, it became obvious to me that this is what I want, where I wanted to belong, and it was what I wanted to believe. And I always felt very comfortable with the family life and the stories of the wives of the Prophet and the companions, and it was just somewhere that over a period of time, and I would have to say, Sheikh Hamza, from your own writings and your tapes that I was listening to, I realised this was obviously the life.
So in terms of, I mean, obviously you've dealt a lot with the Muslim issues, and I think we're all curious, you know, how bad is the situation, given that you've been involved in Muslim women's issues in particular. But what type of things have you come across just in your legal practice?
What we are seeing every day, both in my day-to-day practice and also on the committees that I'm having to deal with things, is our issues of forced marriage, where people just do not understand the difference between their cultural practices, particularly those of which we have almost 2 million in this country from the South Asian continent, that these practices are not Islamic, they are cultural, and part of my work is to point that out. Arising from forced marriage, we have honour-based violence, girls who are killed because they are trying to breach those cultural practices, either trying to run away from forced marriage or being within a forced marriage which has led to violence, trying to escape it. We have huge problems, one would have to say, in the United Kingdom of people being married to their first cousins against their wishes, tied in with the value of the British passport rather than anything else.
So bringing people from back home for...
Still, it's the first time we've ever had a wave of immigrants when 80% are still marrying from back home. That has very large socio-economic and educational difficulties because the community here, because they're continuing to marry, mostly, if we're talking about the Pakistani community from Mirpur, which I have visited, which is a very particularly poor part of Pakistan, where the current rates of literacy are only 3% for women and 35% for men. So if you're continuing to bring in spouses with that lack of education, it has big impacts on the community here and their advancement, and they're continuing to fail in that. And I think if you look to why young men in particular are turning to crime and drugs or perhaps to terrorism, I think a lot of it lies in the root there, and there are real difficulties in the family life.
Well, another thing that's interesting is you've actually gone, for the British government, you've gone to overseas. You've been to Pakistan, yes, and looked at women's issues there, and also now just recently Saudi Arabia. How was that experience? Was that the first time you'd visited Muslim countries? And
yes, before I went to Pakistan, where I've been working for several years now, and I probably go about twice a year, I hadn't visited a Muslim country. I've also been recently to Turkey as part of my government work. And of course each experience is completely different, and the women in each of the countries, although they are all very strong and amazing women, are very different in their world that they live in. In Saudi Arabia, which I've just returned from a few weeks ago, a most amazing experience to see such highly educated, serene, beautiful women who fully contribute to Saudi Arabian life, both in terms of the businesses they run, the work they do in hospitals, and the amazing charitable work they do. Again, we're able to come back here and break down the preconceptions and hopefully move forward together. As a result of the trip, the British Foreign Office are looking to bring a delegation of Saudi women over here, particularly to look at advancing together issues over violence.
You were particularly looking at issues over violence in Saudi Arabia?
Yeah, right. We looked at all aspects of women's life in Saudi Arabia, but my particular interest was looking at issues of how they're tackling and beginning to tackle issues of violence against women and children. I was very lucky to have a meeting with a Sharia judge. I think he was terrified meeting me. But,
really? That's an interesting experience.
He was very good to meet me and has kindly invited me to come back and actually see the courts in action.
That's wonderful.
But also I met doctors there, and they're setting up a nationwide network in Saudi Arabia of specialist paediatricians and psychologists.
To report abuse?
Yes, so that there'll be special teams of doctors throughout Saudi Arabia who will identify themselves or have cases referred to them, will learn the specialist things that are needed by the courts, and are working in conjunction with the Sharia courts to start addressing these matters. And I can tell you that the Sharia judge I met put me in no doubt whatsoever of how seriously he and his brothers are intending to take this matter. I'm hoping in the future that they'll have female judges.
Yes,
so that maybe
yes, I think so.
Next year they're going to have the first female law students, so that's right. The start.
What is your perception of Muslim women?
Very much influenced by religion, and probably not as free as a Western woman would be to basically dress the way she wants and speak the way she wants.
They can have a hard life. You know, sometimes they face quite a lot of difficulties and they are discriminated. But my personal, attitude is I just consider them exactly like me.
I don't really have a perception. I don't know any Muslim women to form an opinion, really.
In the UK, I think that they probably have a lot more freedom than anywhere else in the world. I actually live out in Singapore, so there's a lot of Muslim women there, and I think that there are some times when they do have a lot of freedom, but there's a lot of times in certain countries where they're very repressed, so it really changes on where you are in the world.
I guess quite repressed, or at least that's how it seems in general. Like when you walk around, they're always kind of, I don't really know.
Well, as a judge, how were you perceived as a Muslim woman in the UK to maybe your colleagues and things like that when you first became a Muslim?
When was it really that you became Muslim?
Just before Ramadan last year. I don't at the present time make a big issue of it. I recall that one of the best Christians that I know is a High Court judge in England. He never talked about it, his Christianity, he just showed it by his way of life. And eventually you would say, what is it about Mark Headley that is so wonderful? And some people, didn't you know he's a very active Christian? I'm not very wonderful, and I'm also very much a learner in Islam, so I think it's important that I keep a relatively low profile, carry on learning.
You have, because your responsibility, you have an entire district. How do you rate the domestic violence? Is there more domestic violence in the Muslim community, or is it consistent with the national average or less?
We don't have statistics, but from all the work I've done, we have no reason to think that it's any greater within the Muslim community than within the dominant community. The difficulty is that there are certain barriers that women have, or men who are suffering this violence, to get over. Matters of racism against them, language difficulties, immigration issues, matters of izzat, of feeling that they're shaming their family if they come forward, lack of facilities for them. I mean, I was only talking yesterday to a very active Muslim woman in Wales, Shaheen Taj, of how we need to set up a nationwide group of Muslim female counsellors that women can go to, because if women feel that they go forward and the people that they'll speak to don't understand where they're coming from, they're not going to come forward.
And they also, I think, often assume because it's a Muslim woman, you know, she's oppressed because of her being a Muslim woman. People tend to not be able to see it as this is a human problem. They really begin, just because of the mere fact it's a Muslim woman, there's an automatic assumption that it's related to the religion, which is a real problem. We seem to have an inability to really see ourselves.
I didn't want to take my very smart hijab and abaya off when I came back from Saudi Arabia last week. I'd spent a lot of money on it. It was very nice.
Very smart, isn't it?
Very smart.
Some of them are beautiful,
with the sleeves.
Yes.
And also, partly because I didn't want to take it off, but secondly, as an experiment, I kept it all on going through Heathrow and Manchester Airport just to see what the reaction would be to me. And it only took minutes in Manchester Airport for a man to be very rude to me.
Really? What happened?
Which never happened before.
It's never happened before.
And people don't realize it.
Get out of the way, you. You said to me.
My wife, we were at a grocery store, and there was a Mexican girl was doing the thing, and the boy was up on the, she had the baby up on the thing because she was getting the things, and the girl said in Spanish to the other girl, just knock him over. And my wife just looked at her and she said, I speak Spanish, you know, because my wife's Mexican, but she had a hijab. She just assumed she was Arab, you know. And people have no, it's ignorance.
Do you know what fascinates me? Sheikh Hans and I both come from Roman Catholic backgrounds, and nuns the world over who wear identical clothes.
Yes. To the Kuwaiti women.
Right.
They look like Kuwaiti women.
Right.
Because you know the Kuwaiti women wear the white and with the black over it.
Right.
And regardless of anybody's religion, people have this very
veneration.
Positive view of nuns. If they see nuns in an airport, they'll smile at them. Look, there's some nuns. Isn't this nice? You know.
They feel more comfortable sometimes.
Psychologically, I want to know the difference.
Yeah.
Why are they not
It's the image, I think. But how do you feel about that? Do you think this somehow will start changing this whole image? And
not at the present time.
No.
Because with the with the Islamophobia, with the whole terrorist threat, and the communities aren't helping themselves either in that.
Yeah, this is the real problem.
Yeah, I dislike this word, Islamophobia, but you know, it's true.
Is that the case in the UK? Is there like a huge Islamophobia?
Huge.
It's growing on me.
Yes.
I didn't like the word before,
really?
but I'm kind of getting used to it now.
I was interested to ask, I mean, you were talking about how you gradually started to learn about Islamic law and Islamic Sharia. I'm just wondering, how does that fit with your work? Because does that create some sort of conflict? Or?
The Sharia judge asked me this question.
Oh, really? Okay.
Very interesting. We had a delegation of our most senior judges out to Pakistan recently because we've signed bilateral agreements with them about returning children and matters of this sort. And before they arrived, the Sharia judges in Pakistan read our Children's Act. And when they arrived, they said there is nothing in your law that contradicts anything in Sharia law.
Yeah.
There is no difficulties about that.
It's one of the things I think a lot of people don't realize. you know, people that have studied Western law and Islamic law, just so much of law is rooted in common sense. It's rooted in very rational principles. I mean, the majority of Islamic law. In fact, I think a lot of Western people, when they study Islamic marital laws, are actually shocked at how progressive a lot of the laws are. I mean, that's more...
You're smiling. That means you've studied it?
I have been studying it.
Yeah, I see the smile. Yeah.
I've recently spoken to a female professor of Sharia law at Lahore University and a female professor of law, Professor Ali, at Warwick University here, who was Minister for Women's Development in Pakistan, but she's an English professor of law. They both told me within 3 weeks the same story, that when they lecture on Sharia family law, particularly the rights that women have, the demands they can make for their nikah contract, the male students all say, you're making this up.
No, they don't believe it.
This is the male Muslim students.
Yeah.
You're making this up. You're only saying this to please the girls.
Yeah.
Would you prefer to have somebody that decided to marry another woman as a husband, you decided to marry another woman, or would you rather have somebody that is just married to you but perhaps has extramarital affairs that you don't know about?
I'd rather someone was married to me and stayed with me and have no extramarital affairs.
Ooh, that is a hard question. I've never thought about that.
No, never.
Well, you mean cheating or actually knowing about it? Well, if I found out that I was with somebody that was cheating, I just wouldn't be with them. And I think it's totally wrong. I can't see why they should have 4 wives. Why? You know, to me, marriage is like love and trust and, you know, all that.
What do you think about polygamy just in general?
I mean, as long as women happy to be like in this kind of relations, I think it's fine. But if they kind of want just like one man, and then I think it's wrong. And I think if men can do that, that women can do that as well. So one woman can have like few guys. Well, so I don't know.
Well, I wanted to ask you, when we were, talking about legal systems, we spoke about other countries that maybe didn't allow the woman to come forth for her rights because she was scared in some way that she may have other rights taken away from her.
Look at legal systems throughout the world, and really, it isn't a question of the laws you have.
Yes,
it's a question of whether men or women feel able to access those courts. The courts have to be. And when the judge asked me last week, when he said to me about the value of women judges, I said, it's not when women are judges in a system. It's not the fact that you may appear before a women judge, but if there are women judges, women feel more comfortable with that system generally because they feel it's going to be more women friendly, if that's the case. But it may be a case in certain countries that women will only want to go to other women judges because they will feel comfortable with that.
Reconciliation, I mean, in conflict theory, it's the most difficult thing is getting the one side to see the other person's side and the other person to see the other. You have to be able to get outside of yourself, which is really a difficult thing to do.
Because that's a strong word, the shuh,
Yeah, shuh is وَمَنْ يُوقَ شُحَّ نَفْسِهِ.
We've recognized, and going to law is the failure. If anybody gets to me, there's been a failure.
Yes.
And we've recognized this.
If anybody gets to you, sorry,
if you actually have to get to me as a family law judge, you failed.
I see. Yeah,
and I actually regard any case that actually fights in front of me as a failure, because at every stage, even if it gets to me as the court, I will do everything I can to get that couple to negotiate and to settle either on their own or with help from advisors. And we've now made this the central tenet of our whole family law system, whether it's about money or divorce or the children, that we do everything to help that couple and that family to at least come to an agreement, if they can't be reconciled as a family, to come to agreements about those issues. Now, I think what we very much need, while we're developing that, is that we need a system, certainly throughout the United Kingdom, that Muslim families have got somewhere safe and appropriate and neutral
and they can do that
they can go to, where so law should be the last resort.
It's surgery.
Yeah. But we don't have that, and I'm hoping
the Jewish community does have it.
They have a wonderful system.
Yeah.
I was going to ask
feel
you.
full rights there. They feel safe to go there.
And they use their halakha law.
They use it for contracts. They use it any disputes in the
I mean, that's the beauty of it. We have the same thing in the U.S. that you can actually set up. They're like people's courts where people sign an agreement and then it becomes legally binding.
Yes.
They have to take the arbitrator's decision.
But throughout this country we have women who are trained lawyers, often because of hijab, are not working because they have difficulty getting into firms.
Oh, really?
Who could take part in this process.
Yeah.
Why aren't they working? Just discrimination?
And we've seen that. What's interesting is we've seen that in every country we've been to.
Yeah.
We've had women complain to us that they can't get jobs wearing the hijab. And I met a woman in one of the Arab countries. I could tell she was a devout woman just from her face. And so I was surprised she didn't have hijab on. And then as we were leaving, she said to me, I'm really thinking about quitting this job. And I said, why? And she says, because right when I get to the door, I take off my hijab. And when I finish my job, right when I get to the door, I put it back on because they won't allow me to wear the hijab. And you know, this is what I was trained in, and in this field in our country, you can't get a job wearing the hijab. And I was so distressed to hear that. You know, what humiliation to be in a Muslim country. I mean, it's one thing in the UK where people are just unaccustomed to this, but to be in a Muslim country where you can't wear a hijab.
I've gone through a real issue with girls who've said this to me. I mean, should I say to them? Because in England, once you had the job, they could never sack you. And in fact, once you had the job and you wore your hijab, people would get used to it within a week or so, and that would be the end of it. So therefore, should I advise these girls, highly qualified girls, who can't get jobs because of it, and they can never prove of that, because there are 200 applicants for every job anyway, take it off for the interview and put it back on next week when you've got the job. Now that's a real moral dilemma, because do we need those women in those positions, in those firms, and once they're there, and
that's called a nazila.
I was going to ask you, what is this?
That is a nazila.
I don't know what to say to
a nazila. I mean, that is a nazila, and that's where you would really need somebody like Sheikh Ali Juma or Sheikh Abdullah bin Bayya, somebody at that level that could really be able to take that. I mean, I wouldn't want the responsibility of saying, I could have an opinion, but I don't want the responsibility of...
We'll have to put you through to Sheikh Ali Juma. We met him in Egypt. He's wonderful,
Again, Judge Marilyn, it's always wonderful to see you, and I'm really happy with, you know, I actually feel just very honored to have people like you coming into Islam and honoring the community. The Prophet ﷺ made a dua about Sayyidina Umar, Allahumma a'izz al-Islam bi ahad al-Umarain, you know, make Islam strong with one of the Omars. And it was Umar ibn al-Khattab that Allah chose to answer that prayer. But it's one of the things that strengthens Islam. We're strengthened by Islam, but it's also Islam is strengthened by strong people. So it's really good to have such a strong, like Bodicea. You know, we were going to do this by the statue of Bodicea, the great Celtic female warrior that fought the Romans. So, you know, may you be a Bodicea of Islam, inshallah.
Well, Sheikh Hamza, I owe so much to you, and I only hope as one of your students I can in any way, even 1%, repay what you have given to me.
Thank you.
Well, thank you so much, really.
Thank you for the opportunity you gave me. This is a very important question. The matter of the attack made on our beloved Prophet Muhammad ﷺ has actually its roots in many things. So in order to understand it, we have to cover all of this aspect. First, let me just make this statement. We keep hearing, especially in the Muslim media and in particular in the Middle East and other media, you keep hearing about the division between the West and Islam and Muslims, and saying that the West attacking Muslim and the West attacking the Prophet and things like that. I myself, I'm a hybrid of a Westerner and Middle Eastern, and I can tell you from my first-hand experience, for example, I'm Australian. In Australia, people by nature are fair. They actually believe in the fair go. And hence, they will try to give the people a chance. But what happens is, in the mass media every day. There is no single day that there is nothing bad in the news about Islam or Muslims. It's always there. There's always something bad about Muslim and Islam. That's why people will subconsciously get a negative feeling, and they actually get the wrong idea about Islam and Muslims, unless they personally know some Muslim people, and those Muslim people are portraying Islam the way it is. Now what's happening, one of my friends used to be a worker in a national newspaper, and one of his reporter's friends came to him and said, look, you Muslims are your worst enemy. He said, how come? He said, I went today to a particular mosque. He mentioned it was one of the main mosques in the northern suburbs of Melbourne. He said, I went there, and as soon as we get there, with the camera crew and things like that, people confronted us saying, oh, you Westerners, you Zionists, you don't give Islam a fair go, and you are blah, 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 blah. He said, I was there trying to show the people their own point of view, what the Muslims really think, and here they are attacking me even before I spoke, before they can see that I'm actually there to help them, not against them. So it's a two-way street. What's happening? First, in the media, there have been a big campaign going to tens of years ago, even before September 11, against Islam and Muslims. And one of such thing is always portraying and giving labeling whatever happens with the Muslims. If someone who is a Muslim that either committed the act or is suspected to do the act, they call it terrorism, an act of terror. If the same exact act is done by a non-Muslim, it's not labeled as terror. It's labeled as a crime. I'll give one quick example. I graduated from Monash University from my master's, and before I started at the university in the early 2000s, I think around 2003, at the main campus in Clayton, one of the Chinese or Asian descendant students went to the university campus and made a massacre. He opened his machine gun and killed many students and teachers. Now, this was reported in a relatively calm way, and because he was not Muslim, he was never labeled a terrorist. Now, imagine the same act was done by a Muslim. So in his case, they said they spoke to his mother, he had mental issues, he had whatever. He had lots of pressure around him, and then he decided to do this. Well, if it was a Muslim, then it would have been labeled as an act of terrorism. People would be jumping up and down. They're scared that this could be concentrated or orchestrated something. Even if that person had similar situation, he had personal problems, he had mental problems, he had pressure. No, all of that is thrown aside. What matters is that he's Muslim, so this must be an act of terrorism, and there must be lots of people behind it. This is what's been happening. So, on one end, you've got people watching day in, day out on the news, in the media, newspapers, internet, you name it. They keep hearing the bad things associated with Muslims and Islam. So they already build a prejudice and the stereotype Islam and Muslims. So the next time they see a Muslim, they have all of that in the back of their mind, and they act accordingly. At the same time, Muslim watch the news and they see all these bad things about Islam and Muslims, they know that's not right. It doesn't represent them, at least. And then when things happen related to political matters, like in the United Nations, the whole world, majority, absolute majority, votes for one matter that Muslims are really deeply concerned about, you only have 1, 2, 3 or a handful of nations voting against it, and one of them will have the right of veto, and hence even the absolute majority of the world say, no, this is wrong, it needs to be fixed. It's stopped. And hence the Muslims feel like they are betrayed, and they have negative feeling toward that country in particular, and then it's changed to the West in general. So when someone have been wrongly taught via the media and other things that Islam is bad, Muslims are bad, etc., 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 what is the epitome of Islam and Muslims? You look and say, oh yeah, they adore, and the ultimate figure that represents Islam is their Prophet, Muhammad. So he wants to insult Muslims, so what do? They go to the top and insult the Prophet. Now, that's another thing. People who do insult the Prophet, you will find that in many cases it was on purpose. There is no two way about it. You know that someone will be offended by something, you know that for every action there is a reaction. They are actually seeking the reaction. In many instances, it is adding to that stereotype, to the whole idea. So it's portraying Muslims, basically, simply put, as a big gorilla. So the media, they don't give them fair chance. And I've seen firsthand many interviews. Some reporters come with a predetermined agenda. He asks the Muslims about a particular topic. So he could ask 50 different people, but he does not receive the answer he's hoping for. Then you've got one idiot who comes and he's, full of anger towards a particular topic, and he believes that the media is not fair and biased and things like that. Then he goes and falls into the trap of that reporter and gives him exactly what he wants. So the reporter ignores the other 49 or 50 people, and what ends up on the news is that particular person. While that could be his personal opinion or representing one particular part of the community, but does not represent the absolute majority. And hence the report becomes biased. But what is seen by the rest of the people is that. And then they take the idea that this is what the Muslims really think. And it adds petrol to the fire. So it is a two-way street. And on the other hand, you have lots of multi-faith meetings happening and seminars and people trying to understand each other. And people in those meetings, they understand that Muslim and Islam are not the enemy. And that Muslims are like any other human beings. They have feelings, they have families, they have lives. Yes, they do care about the hereafter, and so should everyone who believes in the hereafter. But still, they are your average people, and they want to live their life in peace. And that whatever happens in the world, you cannot just blindly go and pick anyone who looks like a Muslim and target them as if they were the one who portrayed the thing. Like, for example, let me give you an example. An analogy, the Port Arthur massacre that happened in the 90s in Tasmania. It was portrayed by an Australian. And there were many Japanese tourists in particular that were killed in that attack. So what, if we use the same analogy, then which means every Japanese or anyone who lost someone in their attack will say, oh, you Australians, you're all terrorists, and then go and randomly attack anyone who looks Australian. Is that right logic? No, it was whoever really did it, that's the one who should be facing the punishment, not the one you think associated with him by false association. Just because being Tasmanian or just being Australian, you go and seek revenge out of those people where they have nothing to do with anything. Another example in Russia, a few years back, when Japan won the soccer match. I think it was either Olympics or an international soccer match or something like that. One Japanese was killed in Moscow, I believe, because the Russians lost to the Japanese. So what did this guy have to do with the soccer game? He probably doesn't even follow soccer at all. And what he has to do whether Japan win or lose or whatever. So someone just associated, yes, you're Japanese, must you blah, 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 you went and killed him. So you see the extreme case of association, and this is what's happening all over the world. So at the root of the cause, you ask, why would anyone insult the Prophet ﷺ? It's because of this. They have been given wrong idea, they have portrayed a very bad idea. What's happening on the news, all the bad attributes, all the, the worst thing you can imagine, they just mold it together and they call it Islam and Muslims. So the guy would look at it and he wants to, do something against that beast, so he will go and attack Islam Muslims, and he wants to attack Islam. What is the greatest figure in Islam? Prophet Muhammad. So he wants to attack Islam, he attacks Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Well, by doing so, this is a very wrong act, and people cannot hide but get behind the false freedom of speech. There is no such thing. Okay, well, I'll give you an example. Very simple. In many countries around the world, there is anti-Semitic laws. So anyone who would say anything about a Semite that the Semite doesn't like, there are laws and he could end up in jail, taken to court. Where is the freedom of speech in that situation? There are situations where the reason behind that was that this group of people after the Second World War, they were declared as easy target, lots of negatives against them, negative feelings. So if they don't do something, it might escalate to something again, and the Jews or the Semite might be targeted again. So where is the freedom of speech then? There are situations where when your words or actions could harm one or a group of people, then they should not happen. You should take an analogy. Then where would that be when you are taking the Prophet? You know that your actions and words are going to hurt 1.5 billion people, not just 50 million, 1.5 billion. And infuse the whole thing in all the things that, like for example, in the Second World War, all the bad things that you were hearing about from the Nazis, about the Jews and things like that. If you look at documentaries, you can hear the same pattern is now done against the Muslims. So where are the laws stopping them from doing that? Inciting hatred and end up probably massacres and things like that. And you can see lots of hate crimes happening all over the world. From things that are on the simple, on surface, trivial or not so trivial, but in reality they're all deep and they lead to lots of problems. For someone who doesn't believe in hijab, there are many instances around the world where people go and taking off the hijab or khimar of people. Who gives them the right to do so? For them, they obviously show their hair and everything, and in many cases it was female attackers, some cases it was male attacker. The person who's wearing that veil, it's their right to put it. They consider that this is something that no one are allowed to see except their own families and the close people, and there are rules and regulations for that. So by doing that, this is, for that person, it's very, very, very grave things that they, in many cases, prefer to die rather than that happening to them. So who gives the people right to do that? Talking about freedom, where is their freedom in expressing their religious views and put a piece of cloth that shows that their modesty? They don't want to become, or they don't want to be a sexual object, which now many Western women are complaining about. And that's why you can see, with all the, in spite of all the negative comments, videos, everything they've done about Islam, many people are converted to Islam, or as I call it, reverted to Islam, because Islam means submission to God. You are born, we believe that you are born a Muslim, and Islam has multi-levels. So you are born as a Muslim, then your parents will take you one way or the other. And as the most basic level, if you believe in the one God, and this is another misconception, people try to divert people from becoming Muslim. They claim that Muslims worship their own God, or they worship stones or whatever. It's all false. The God that Muslims worship is the same God that Abraham worshipped, same God that Moses worshipped, same God that Isa, Jesus, worshipped. And although many Christians now, they've got the concept of Trinity, nevertheless they call God, the same God we're talking about, they call him the Father. Without going into details what's right and what's wrong, but it's the same God. Just disagreeing on the name does not change the fact. So let's say, for example, let's give a very simple example. Let's say a group of people declare this is the national day for John the Baptist. So they decide, rightly or wrongly, to go to a particular, let's say, public garden, and they say, we're going to give reverence to anyone who's called John. So anyone we find is called John, we're actually going to give him nice clothes and gifts and whatever, and this will be our way of expressing our love and passion towards John the Baptist. So they come and ask people, what's your name? This says George or whatever. Whoever says John, then they say, come with us. They give him money, they give him gifts, etc. They give him nice clothes, and they take pictures. Now, let's say part of this extreme group, they decide whoever is not called John, that they're going to humiliate them. So you have the big contrast. So at the end, they will show that only those named John have nice looking and nice clothes, while the rest have been humiliated. So then they go and ask, and then the one who says George or says Ali or says any other name, they throw a pie in his face, and they probably wet his clothes and something like that. Now they go and do that for many people before they get in trouble and run away, and then they come across one person while they're still doing that. They ask him his name, and he say Yahya. They say, they throw a pie in his face, and they actually throw colored water on his clothes and things like that, and it becomes dirty. But what they don't know is part of their group before him who know Arabic, they ask him for his name and say Yahya. So they say, Yahya, this is the Arabic for John the Baptist. So they give him the gift and nice clothes. This guy comes, he has nice clothes, they throw the pie at his face. So, in his clothes, so they take a picture, half of him is revered, the other half is humiliated. Well, we're talking about the same name. Yahya is John the Baptist. So what did they do? Opposite to what they intended to do. Same thing. We are Muslim telling you that the name of God is Allah. Whether you call him something else like Elohim or Yahweh or God or any other name, we are talking about the same entity. So just put that in mind. If you are trying to insult God, doesn't matter whether you recognize the name or not, you are insulting your God as well. It's the same God. So that's what happens. So on one level, that's what it is. So when they are coming to insult the Prophet, they are insulting the Prophet because they are out of ignorance, and they think that this is representing all the Muslims. So by insulting the highest figure in Islam, that they are insulting the Muslims, which they are. But this is out of ignorance, and for every action there is reaction. Now, why don't you see a reaction similar to them? So they insult, for example, if there's a Christian, he insults Prophet Muhammad, we insult Jesus. It doesn't happen. For a simple reason, is that as a Muslim, if I insult Prophet, we consider him a Prophet, whether you agree or you don't agree, is not the point. If you insult Jesus, I'm insulted. It's nearly the same as if you insult Prophet Muhammad. If you insult Prophet Moses, I'm insulted. So I came across lots of Christians making jokes and funny jokes about Jesus. I got offended while they're not. And people around them supposed to be Christian were laughing as well, majority. Why? Because for me, Jesus is revered. Same as Moses, same as Muhammad, same as even Prophet Israel was Jacob. If you insult him, I'm insulted. And people, when they start realizing this, they become Muslims, or they become, at least, on the side of Islam and Muslims. They understand that this is the one religion. There are other, this is talking about the Abrahamic religion, the main religions, which are Islam and Christianity and Judaism. Now there are other religions as well. They don't believe in Jesus or Moses or Muhammad or any of the Abrahamic descendants. Also, they actually have their own different approach. and there are many of them who actually would actually revert to Islam as well. And there are many, you can go on the internet and you can look and you'll find out that this is happening all over the world. And now with jihad is now a dirty word, while jihad means struggle. Military jihad is one type, but there are many different types. But if carrying weapons by itself was wrong, why do we have every single country in the world have an army? Why is that? Why do you have police? Just by having Muslims fighting is not wrong. But when someone is actually causing harm to innocent people, whether he's Muslim or non-Muslim, then it's wrong. So again, there's misconception with everything, and people also attack the Quran and say, look here, it's inciting hatred against Jews or Christians or the non-Muslims. Be careful, because in the world there's now the New World Order, and it's on the surface atheist, but in reality it's gearing toward a particular religion that's not God-based. But anyway, that's a different matter. But the same, if you're a Christian, the same of what you're talking, attacking Quran, I can get you quotes from the Bible, and then some try to hide, say, no, this is Old Testament, not the New Testament. Now I'll get you even from the New Testament. But there are many in the Old Testament. So if you're trying to stop the Quran, the same rules that are passed will stop the Bible and the Old Testament, all the New Testament. If you are one of those attacking Islam or Quran, you are actually attacking your own religion, if you're a Christian or Jew, without realizing it. And the laws are changed for everyone. And if, God forbid, the Quran becomes outlawed, the Bible will follow. Make no mistake about it. The New World Religion is not something that follows God, Allah Jal. It's actually based on Satan. And if you're in doubt, you can go and do research and you find out what is the New World Religion. The head of which will be the Antichrist at the Dajjal. This is where they're heading, so don't fool yourself if you're a Christian or Jew. You're not working for your religion, you're working against it. Muslims and Islam are not your enemy. But what you look at are the action. The other trick they use is they show you the reaction and they skip the action. If you see, for example, a young boy with his eye all black eye and a little bit of blood, you say, what happened? You say, oh, this such and such boy, he's a bully and he did this to me. Then you go and take actions against that boy or whatever. But what if you knew that this boy is actually the bully and that he actually went and broke a few bones of the other guy, and that guy, when he's falling, he did it with his arm like that, and by chance it got into the person's eye, and this is the only injury that this guy sustained, while he was causing injury to the other person. If you are shown the action and you see what happened, like there was a CCTV camera captured or something, you will actually take action against this person who's reporting it, because he's the actual bully and he's the actual bad guy. But without that, automatically you'll stand with him against the other party, and that's what's happening in many instances. So that's to talk about, that's the first level. Why would anyone attack and say bad things about Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam? Now, responding to the question, what should we do as Muslims? Well, you need to understand that in Islam there are many schools of thoughts, and every group might come up with a different answer. And even within the group, individuals might do something different. That's normal. This is human beings. That's human nature. Yes, you've got on the extreme. Some people will get extremely angry and they want to, at least for their own mind, to show that they've done something about it. So you can see them screaming and go on demonstrations and been actually drawn into doing something which will turn against them, whether they realize it or not. While you've got those other groups who will go more and be more active in interfaith and try to show people that this is wrong, okay, we should not do it. Like, for example, we had meetings with Catholics, and at the end they said, yes, after a few sessions, yes, we understand. And at that time, it just happened a few years back that the Pope died. So they say, yeah, we understand how you feel. We would not want anyone to insult our Pope. And when the Pope died, we had many condolences from the Muslim. Yeah, we appreciate that, and we can interact on the human level, and we can see that, you know, this is very different from what the media portrays. Other people might become more vocal and try to write the newspapers or whatever chance they can. Not that they will have success in many chances, because many of the media outlets are controlled by the same group. But that's another topic. So what you can do is actually engage in debate and make your voice be heard. You cannot reach the TV, or you cannot reach radio stations. You can upload your video on YouTube. You can do lots of various things. But don't fall into the trap of being pushed to be angry, because anger doesn't solve anything, and people will just end up looking as bubbling idiots or big gorilla that no one understands. And that's what the media has actively done throughout the years up to now. So now people don't understand the Muslims, and whenever the Muslims are given a spot to talk, the thing is edited in a way that, by contrasting to the other parties, Muslims look as if they cannot put a convincing thought together, or they're not coherent, or they just want to be violent and things like that. And if you study media, you'll see that with the same interview, you can either show the person to be one particular way, or you can show them the opposite way. And sometimes they make the whole interview, they might go for an hour, just to get 1 or 2 seconds with what they want that will be, and sometimes it's just content, and sometimes taken out of context, just to promote a particular idea. So it doesn't matter who the person is, they can make it appear one way or the other. This is normal. This is, unfortunately, everyday practice. So, if you're not Muslim, do yourself a favor and research Islam properly. Not, you know, if you want to learn about Judaism, where would you go? You go to the Jews. If you want to learn about Christianity, you go to Christians. You want to learn about Islam, you come to Muslim. Unfortunately, nowadays, you got lots of so-called Muslim experts about Muslim. They are not Muslims. And all they're selling are lots of lies and misconceptions and things like that. So if this is your main source of knowledge, this is not knowledge. This is just propaganda. So you can learn from the real Muslims about what Islam teaches and what were the real teaching of the Prophet ﷺ. The Prophet, when he came into an environment in the old Gulf, which is now called Saudi Arabia. He was born in Mecca, and around him were all pagans, worshipping idols. Now in Christianity, if you come and tell the average Christian the name you just invent, and you say, oh yeah, this is Prophet such and such, what did he do? He went and told people to come to God. They will accept, yeah, this was a prophet. But with all these negative things, once you comes to Prophet Muhammad, if you tell him what Prophet Muhammad did, which all matches the profile of a prophet, he will have something that will stop him from realizing that this is a prophet. Prophet Muhammad have taken the pagans from worshipping idols to worshipping the one God. The God of Adam, the God of Noah, the God of Abraham, the God of Moses, the God of Jesus. Same God. All the Prophet came with a simple message of Islam. On one level, if you believe in God, the one God, who created the universe, you're a Muslim. This is by definition. And the one who labeled this name Muslim was actually Prophet Ibrahim, not Prophet Muhammad. He labeled people who follow one religion as Muslim. Islam means, derived from two words. Salam means peace, and Islam, submission. So you're saying, I submit to God, Allah Jal, the Creator, realize that everything is in His hand, and that this is only a test, short life, and there's a hereafter afterward, and there's either people will go to heaven or hell. This is the basic level of Islam. Anyone who believes that, doesn't matter whether you label yourself a Christian, a Hindu, whatever, if you believe at that level, you are at the first level of Islam. But in order to be complete Muslim, you have to follow the Quran and what Prophet Muhammad came with. Because prophets before Prophet Muhammad, including Jesus, only were sent to a particular group. And you can see that. Jesus, Prophet Isa, was sent to the Israelite and the Israelite only. Not to the West or anyone here. He was sent, it was Paul who later on told his disciples to go around the world, but Jesus never. And you go and check the Bible, when he was asked by one of his followers to preach non-Israelite, he refused, because he was not sent to the non-Israelite. Islam, Prophet Muhammad was the last stone in the house of prophets to complete it and gave religion. He was sent to everyone, absolutely everyone. So this is, in short, what is happening, and I hope that I answered your question, and I'm open for any more questions, and thank you very much for giving me the chance to contribute in your project. Assalamu alaikum.
Very much for watching. I hope you enjoyed. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
يا مستجيب للداعي جب دعوتي بسراي واشفي جميع وجاعي يا مرتجى يا رحمن.
يا مستجيب للداعي جب دعوتي بصراعي واشفي جميع